And we're back like we never left. Oregon fans, what's going on? How you living? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres, publisher and lead editor of Ducks Digest, covering the Oregon Ducks over on Fan Nation, part of the Sports Illustrated Network. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Oregon Recruiting Hour. It is Friday, August 11th, 2023, and there is plenty for us to talk about on today's show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We're coming to you live at a couple of different spots. First, we are on YouTube at Oregon Football Max Torres. We're on Twitter at M Torres Sports, and then we're also coming to you on our Facebook page over on Ducks Digest. So glad to have you guys along. Just kind of outlining today's episode, we have some big targets that we're going to be talking about for Oregon in the 2024 class to kick us off. And then we are also going to be incorporating a mailbag portion of today's show. Asked you guys for some of those questions over on Twitter, and you delivered, asking some questions of me. So if you guys are here in the live chat on YouTube, go ahead and leave me a comment or ask me a question. Let me know how you're feeling about Duck football recruiting. I'm here for all of it. But just to let you guys know, we are going to be getting to the mailbag in the back half of the show. But if you want to make sure that your question is answered, you always have the option of doing super chats. Greatly appreciate those if you want to show a little bit of extra support to the channel as well. But now that we've gotten that out of the way, what do you say? Let's talk some recruiting because it is a big time for Oregon football recruiting right now. A couple of big targets are working their way towards their decisions. Senior season starting. Some people just made their decisions, and we have some updates on some of those guys. So just excited to get into this one. We're going to start today's episode with one of the top targets still on the board for Oregon in the 2024 class. We're looking at St. Louis, Missouri, Christian Brothers wide receiver Jeremiah McClellan. Jeremiah McClellan, to get you up to speed, if you don't know about Jeremiah McClellan, like I said, he's a 4-star wide receiver, rated .9486 on the 247 Sports Composite, ranked the number 100 player in the country, the number 18 wide receiver, and the number 4 recruit in a loaded state of Missouri here in the 2024 cycle. Oregon has been no strangers to the state of Missouri, particularly in this cycle, landing a commitment from 2024 Florissant defensive lineman Tioni Gray, who flipped his commitment from the Tigers to the Ducks. And then you also have Oregon going after Williams Nwaneri. I never know if it's Nwaneri or Nwaneri, but Nwaneri is becoming easier to say. But you have him over there at Lee's Summit, which is a powerhouse school. And yeah, so Oregon is very, very well versed in the state of Missouri. And we're talking about Jeremiah McClellan because he is one of the biggest names on Oregon's board at wide receiver, and he is going to be making his college commitment on Sunday, August 13th at 2 p.m. Central Time. So that comes out to noon on the West Coast. So we have to talk about kind of where things stand in this recruitment and what the latest is I'm hearing as he heads into his decision. Jeremiah McClellan has narrowed his decision to a top 5 of Oregon, Missouri, Ohio State, LSU, and the Georgia Bulldogs. So right now, this one's kind of interesting because he was supposed to take a visit. He was scheduled to take a visit out to Eugene for Saturday Night Live at the very end of July, coming out of the dead period. But that trip ultimately didn't end up happening. So Duck fans on the surface might look at that one and say, oh, man, we're out of it. The Ducks are out of it, and they don't have a chance. But I don't think that's necessarily the case. Kind of the latest buzz that I'm hearing is that this recruitment is not over just yet. That said, I think you have to look at schools like Ohio State. Brian Hartline and the Buckeyes are the leader in the 247 Sports crystal ball at the moment. So they look like they have some serious momentum in this recruitment, and I think it's pretty easy to see why. Heartline is one of the best developers of the wide receiver position, probably the best in college football right now. Ohio State has become an absolute destination for elite wide receiver talent. They have Jeremiah Smith, the number one wide receiver in the country right now, out of the state of Florida, committed. I saw him at the Elite 11, and that guy is a difference maker, absolute dude at the wide receiver spot. So you have development coming from the Ohio State side. You also have location, obviously, in favor of the Buckeyes. But at the same time, maybe you see the Big Ten move kind of creep into the discussion here. We know how big distance is oftentimes in recruitments for top players. I'm not saying that is something that Jeremiah has publicly spoken about as being a factor in his decision, but as it comes down to those final hours, when the family is sitting together, they're around the table talking pros and cons, talking about where someone's really going to take their talents, I think that it kind of becomes more pressing, or maybe starts to carry more weight, is what I'm saying. But fortunately for the Ducks and Jeremiah McClellan's recruitment, they're heading to the Big Ten. They're going to be in the Big Ten by the time Jeremiah McClellan's playing his college ball. So I would think that Oregon can use that move to kind of, sweeten their pitch a little bit. Hey, we're going to be playing in the Big Ten. We're going to be coming back out your way, out towards Missouri, and you're going to be able to see your son play a little bit more. So I think that Jeremiah McClellan, if I'm Oregon, that's certainly factoring into the pitch that you're making for him. And as you're trying to kind of make up some ground here in the final days here before his commitment. So we already talked about Ohio State and how things are maybe trending in favor of the Buckeyes right now. But I'm saying that I'm hearing a little bit that Oregon still has a chance in this one. I'm not making my prediction to Oregon right now. I'm not saying the Ducks lead. I'm just giving you my latest intel, and it sounds like this one isn't over. And even if Jeremiah McClellan doesn't commit to the Ducks on Sunday, I think that he is certainly a guy that I would think Oregon's going to stay involved in, continue recruiting him, and maybe try to get him back out to Eugene for a game, because even though Oregon has 22 verbal commitments right now, none of those guys are locked in. It's not over until the pen meets the paper. And in some cases, it's not even over until you get to campus, as we've seen in the past year or so with a wild transfer portal cycle. Another interesting development on the Jeremiah McClellan front, if you guys are on Twitter and you like to follow Oregon recruiting over there, a lot of Oregon players have been voicing their support for Jeremiah McClellan and making their pitch for him to come to Eugene with the hashtag JMacToEugene. I'm going to see if I can bring some of these up. We'll go ahead and take the highlights off here for just a second. But let's go ahead and see what things are looking like with this movement over social media as the Ducks try to drum up some buzz and really show that he is a priority and that he is wanted in Eugene. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. I was retweeting a lot of these guys. Here you have Ryder Hayes, a 2024 quarterback that committed to Oregon. You have Adrian Wilson, Oregon's newest 2025 wide receiver commit. Let's see who else we have here. You have Luke Moga, Oregon's 2024 commit. Tyler Turner. You have Tioni Gray. Austin Novus add Jurion Dickey, who's a current wide receiver at Oregon. Fox Crater, a 2024 offensive lineman committed to Oregon. Aaron Flowers, a 24 safety committed to Oregon out of the state of Texas. So Oregon is going full steam ahead to try and get themselves into this sweepstakes and ultimately try to win this recruitment for Jeremiah McClellan. And I'm going to tell you why I think it's so important for Oregon to get Jeremiah McClellan. I think when I look at this wide receiver haul, you have some great pieces in place, right? You have Jordan Anderson, you have Dylan Gresham, and you have Jack Ressler. The thing that I've kind of learned a little bit more in recent days and in recent weeks when looking at this wide receiver haul for Oregon is that Jordan Anderson and Dylan Gresham are really similar when you're looking at what kind of a player those guys are and the skill sets that they bring to Oregon. Both of them are incredibly explosive, great hands, super productive, but I think you're still looking for that big body wide receiver, that guy who can, really be physical at the point of attack. And I think that I think that Jeremiah McClellan is one of the more physical guys that Oregon is recruiting. Listed at 6 foot, 190 pounds. And I think he was just a difference maker when I was watching him at the OT7 championships earlier this summer for California Power. I think he's just a little bit of a different skill set, different kind of guy than Oregon has in the fold right now at the wide receiver position. So you want to make him a priority so you can not only have really quality players in your class, but you don't want too many guys that kind of do the same thing. And I think that Jeremiah McClellan can be a little bit more of a possession wide receiver, but also a guy who can do a little bit of everything, take the top off the defense, be that red zone guy that can go up and get it, that can muscle away defenders. I think that that's certainly something that Junior Adams would love to add into this class. So Jeremiah McClellan is really the name at wide receiver that Oregon is still looking hard at right now in the 24 class. And I'm telling you, if he doesn't end up a Duck on Sunday, I don't think all hope is lost, as I think that I'm pretty confident that Oregon's going to stay involved there in the event that they don't get him, because that's kind of what they're doing, I think, with some of their other wide receiver targets who are committed elsewhere. So we can go ahead and kind of table that one for later in the mailbag question, because I did have a mailbag question talking about potential flip candidates for Oregon here in the 2024 recruiting class. All right, let's see. I did have one more guy I wanted to talk about here. Let me go ahead and get his highlights up. We're going to be talking about 2025 Pflugerville, Texas, Weiss High School wide receiver Adrian Wilson. Adrian Wilson recently committed to Oregon. He was out in Eugene for the Saturday Night Live recruiting camp, and this was a really big recruiting win for Oregon. I didn't really get to talk about him on the podcast when he made his initial commitment to Oregon, but I did just recently write a full write-up from my interview with Adrian Wilson. So go over to ducksdigest.com and give that one a read if you haven't. It's a free read, and I think it provides some excellent insight into Wilson's recruitment. So one of the things that's interesting about Wilson, I think you have to just look at the tape while we have him up right now. I mean, he's got tremendous ball skills and is really a receiver that excels at creating some separation from the defense and just kind of finding those pockets where he can fit in just right and make an impact. He's 6'2", 173 pounds, and this is a guy that can jump out of the gym. I mean, look at this play right here on just a nice little 30-yard pass, able to get his defender beat on the outside, and just does a great job of reeling that one in. So Adrian Wilson is just about as explosive. The one-hand grab there. He's explosive. He's twitchy. He's got great hands. And he's also a guy who competes as a varsity at the varsity level in track and field in the high jump. So Adrian Wilson is much more than just a football player, just a wide receiver, taking a hit there in traffic as he comes down and catches the ball. Watching the tape here on Huddle. But he just seems like a wide receiver that has a bunch of juice in his game. And he's someone that is going to be super exciting to watch. But all that said, he did commit to Oregon. I reached out to one of my connections out there in the state of Texas to kind of get some of their thoughts. And I was told that he thinks there's going to be some more wrinkles, twists and turns in that recruitment. So not to say that he doesn't think that Wilson's going to stay committed here, but there's still so much time left in this recruitment, so you can't celebrate 2025 commits too much. I will say, though, I think this is a drastically different recruitment than that of Achilles Smith Jr., given that his dad went to Oregon. He seems like a guy who's really locked in, even though he still has 2 years of high school football left. But Adrian Wilson is a commit I'm super excited about for Oregon. Really hot start in the 25 recruiting class, getting Achilles Smith Jr., who I just mentioned, at quarterback. And then you also pair Adrian Wilson with Dallas Wilson out of the Tampa, Florida area. Both of those guys are top 100 caliber recruits in the 2025 recruiting class for Oregon. So they're off to a really hot start, and I think that that's exactly where you want to be Dallas Wilson's 6'3", 180, and then Adrian Wilson is 6'2", 173. So these are two guys that are super, super talented, but I wanted to give a little bit more insight into Adrian Wilson and kind of what I learned from my interview with him. It was a bit of an interesting commitment for Oregon with Adrian Wilson, seeing that he committed to the TCU Horned Frogs just about a month earlier on June 25th. But when I asked him kind of what helped Oregon ultimately win out in that recruitment, it really came down to connections. And this is where I got to tell you guys about one of the most valuable pieces of Oregon's staff here in 2023 under Dan Lanning. You remember Antonio Parks? He came over from Arizona State following the 2022 season. Also previously worked with Will Stein at UTSA. Antonio Parks played a crucial role in this recruitment. As Wilson told me, that was one of the strongest connections, one of the strongest relationships that he had on this Oregon staff. So he talked about how Parks texted him after that commitment to TCU saying, hey, we got to get that flipped like right now. So he did a really good job of identifying him as a priority target. Parks also works with the wide receivers at Oregon as an offensive analyst. So he's been a big part of Oregon's recruiting success in the state of Texas, and he gets a huge commitment to start things off in the 25 class in Adrian Wilson. Wilson also talked about how there was some familiarity with Will Stein, who had been coaching at the high school level in Austin, and then had also coached, of course, at UTSA. And then Dan Lanning, obviously have to have that head man involved. He does a great job of being personally involved in a lot of these recruitments. And I think that also speaks to Lanning's ability as a recruiter to be able to juggle everything that's going on, the SNL camp, the upcoming 23 season. Him being involved in that recruitment was also something that really helped. What was interesting in this recruitment that I also learned is that Adrian Wilson didn't have too much of a prior relationship with Junior Adams. Got out for that visit on campus, and they really kind of just hit it off. Junior Adams was with him like the entire time, touring the facilities. He gave him his campus tour, and he also stayed with him through the photo shoot. So this was just a really good job by Oregon, just of fully going after a guy with multiple members of the coaching staff, and ultimately sealing the deal with that visit for Saturday Night Live. Wilson talked about how this was something that had been in the works for a while, but once he got on campus in Eugene, met the coaches in person, saw the facilities, saw the campus, that was kind of all she wrote. And that's why he ultimately flipped his commitment from TCU to Oregon. Interesting timing, right? It was just a month after he committed to TCU. Like we talked about with Achilles Smith, Dallas Wilson, still a long way to go in their high school careers. But he said that, if you don't want to be at the school that you're committed, why stay committed? And that was TCU, obviously. So pretty blunt answer, but I don't think it was disrespectful in any way. Just kind of giving you the real of it and where things kind of were at with him in his recruitment. So Adrian Wilson is a guy that I'm really excited about. Glad that Oregon has him in the fold. He talked about other guys that he wants to recruit to Oregon, and he named one of the biggest names in the 25 class. We're talking about 5-star Duncanville wide receiver DeCorian Moore. I had an interview with DeCorian Moore back in June at the OT7 championships. That is a huge target for Oregon here in the 25 recruiting class, especially at the wide receiver position. He was someone that is familiar with Oregon, has been out to Oregon twice now, and I fully expect he's going to be one of the top wide receiver targets for Junior Adams, Antonio Parks, Dan Lanning in this 2025 recruiting class. So now that Wilson's locked in and committed, I should say, he's going to go ahead and do his thing as a peer recruiter for Oregon here in the 2025 recruiting class. All right, what else do we have here? I'm trying to think about anything else that I wanted to get to as far as the recruiting hour goes. I think one thing that's exciting to let you guys know, if you follow me on Twitter at @mtorresports, you already knew this, but My plan today is to go to the Gardena Serra Los Alamitos scrimmage Friday afternoon and evening. What's notable about that, you have 2 Oregon commits that are expected to be at that practice. Dakota Fields, Oregon's newest commit in the 24 class, an elite cornerback who flipped his commitment from USC to Oregon. And then you also have Kamar Matudi, one of Oregon's top defensive commits in this class, a linebacker for Los Alamitos. He recently transferred from Campbell Hall to Los Alamitos, primarily so he could enroll early at his school of choice, which, of course, as we all know, is Oregon. So it should be some fun content coming out of that practice. Going to get some interviews, definitely with Dakota, seeing that I haven't talked to him since he made his decision. So definitely keep an eye out for that one. And you can find all the content over on at Torres Sports on Twitter. So that'll be a fun one. Starting to kind of just get excited about the 2023 high school football season. The college season doesn't start until September 2nd for Oregon when the Ducks take on Portland State at home in Eugene at Autzen Stadium. But the high school season is here. The high school season is here, and we'll see our first games starting next week. Friday, August 18th is the first game. I'm still trying to figure out which game I want to go to on Friday. You have Serra against Orange Lutheran. So Dakota Fields and the Cavaliers will take on Orange Lutheran, another top Trinity League power here in Southern California. And then you also have Mater Dei against Corona Centennial out there in the Inland Empire. That's a game I'm thinking about. You got Hassan Longstreet, 2025 quarterback that recently transferred from Inglewood to Corona Centennial. So 2 top 5 California teams. That might be the spot for me. But super excited to get on the road, get back out to practices, talk to players, talk to coaches, talk to parents, and just keep getting all that scoop and insight. So really excited for that one, and just excited to be back. Excited for football to be back, man. How can you not be? So with all that said, how about we get into a little bit of our mailbag, open up the big old bag of mail, as Chip Patterson says over on the Cover 3 podcast. He does an awesome job with Danny Cannell, Bud Elliott, and a couple other folks as well. But if you guys are here live on YouTube, wow, we got a crowd out here tonight or today. We got 70 folks in the live stream. Thank you guys so much for being here. Do me a quick favor, hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on future live shows like this. Trying to ramp up the podcast. Really been having a lot of fun. So let's see what we have here on the mailbag portion. This comes from Twitter. I put out a tweet asking for questions, and we had some great responses. So appreciate you guys for responding and helping guide the show. First question comes from YFZ450 Duck, who asked, what was the best part of the Achilles Smith interview? Yeah, so if you guys haven't seen this already, I was out in San Diego last weekend to see Achilles Smith Jr. At Lincoln, Oregon's newest 2025 commit, and his dad, Achilles Smith, the legendary Oregon quarterback. He coaches at Lincoln, so I figured I wanted to take some of his time and just kind of pick his brain on a couple of things. There was a lot of good stuff in that interview. Talked about how it was unique for him to experience that recruitment with his son, just as a parent versus as a coach. Talked about how he has been going to Oregon games since he was 6 or 7. Oregon was one of his first words, I think, is kind of what he joked about. But I think my favorite part of that interview was really just hearing the reel and hearing his thoughts about the move to the Big Ten, because he talked about more or less that was just a move Oregon had to make to keep getting the exposure, to keep playing big-time football. So while it was bittersweet, it was sad for him to see the Pac-12, more or less dissolve. That's where it's going right now. It's only the Pac-4. He thought that it was, a good move for Oregon. So I think that was just interesting to see that player insight, a former player, making those thoughts known, and just having that bittersweetness, because the Pac-12 has produced some amazing teams, some amazing games. I grew up watching the Pac-12, primarily Stanford, since I'm from the Bay Area, but then Oregon got on my radar around 4th grade, 5th grade. So just cool to kind of see his insight about where college is headed. Talked about how he wants to talk with some parents of recruits just to give them some insight on the recruiting process, because this is the craziest time we've ever seen in college football, and certainly in recruiting. You have name, image, and likeness, you have the transfer portal, you have the coaching carousel, and so much is happening. You have guys flipping, you have drama. There's just so much going on in the modern era of college football. So I think those were some of my favorite insights from that interview. So thank you for the question. All right, let's get to our next question. This question comes from Matt Hardy. Thanks for the question, Matt. Matt asks, with the new move to the Big Ten, any chance on flipping guys like Rushing or Williams? I think we're talking there about Elijah Rushing, the 5-star edge rusher committed to Arizona, and then Justin Williams, 5-star linebacker that is currently committed to Georgia. So I've talked about this on a couple of shows recently, but what's the recruiting impact of Oregon's move to the Big Ten? I think it's obviously a very positive move when it comes to the recruiting trail, and I think it's really nothing but positive as far as future impact and what you're going to see ultimately happen now that they made that move. They made that move. You get Dakota Fields. I don't think that was instrumental in his decision, but it's positive. So Elijah Rushing, I think that's an interesting one. It's a complicated recruitment, seeing that he is a hometown kid. I know that Arizona really sold him on that hometown hero aspect of his recruitment, being able to be a guy that can be the face of the program and really help the Wildcats get back to a good spot under Jed Fish. So I think that the move certainly helps, but I'm curious how much it moves the needle for a guy like Elijah Rushing. I know that they're going to stay recruiting him. Now that Arizona is going to the Big 12, that's obviously a move that helped kind of shore up their conference stability, at least in these next couple of years, making that move alongside Arizona State, Utah, Colorado. I think that it helps their chances of flipping a guy like Elijah Rushing. I'm not predicting that's going to happen right now, but I think it certainly only helps Oregon sell themselves even better. They have the development factor over Arizona. You have the big game factor over Arizona. Now that you're heading to the Big 10 versus the Big 12, you certainly have, I think, stronger coaches when you're looking at what Elijah Rushing ultimately wants to do and become one of the best edge rushers in college football. Dan Lanning, Tosh Lupoi, that factor was huge in Oregon's recruitment of Elijah Rushing. But that was an interesting recruitment. We already talked about how Oregon was really in the driver's seat for a long time in that recruitment, and then Arizona came in late and really put the pressure on and ultimately were able to seal the deal. So I think that's probably more realistic than Justin Williams, but since you asked about him, let's do it. Let's make the case for for Justin Williams, the 5-star linebacker out of Conroe, Texas, Oak Ridge High School. Is it Oak Ridge? I don't know why I'm having second thoughts on that. Okay, it is Oak Ridge. Justin Williams and Georgia. I mean, this was one that I think Oregon was in an awesome spot for a really long time. Heck, I've written that I even thought he was on the verge of committing to Oregon in the fall. Dan Lanning did an awesome job just prioritizing him as one of Oregon's top linebacker targets here in the 24 class. And when you lose a recruit to a school like Georgia, I think it's a different tune than when you lose a guy like Elijah Rushing to Arizona, because Arizona has, I don't want to say never, but rarely competed with Oregon on the recruiting trail. They flipped Tetairoa and McClellan in the 22 class, but I really think that was just because of the coaching change from Cristobal to Lanning. The whole staff changed, and he had teammates over at Arizona. But when you lose out on a guy like Justin Williams to Georgia, there's really not that much that you can say. I mean, how do you negatively recruit against Georgia? I'm not saying that's Oregon's goal, but just as a fan, I'm posing that question to you guys. How do you negatively recruit against Georgia? Back-to-back national titles. Their entire 2021 defense is now in the NFL or on an NFL team. Kirby Smart as a head coach. You're at the forefront of the sport in the SEC. I mean, I could go on here. I'm not trying to hype up Georgia. I'm just trying to look at it through an analytical lens and kind of just give you my thoughts here. But I think that now that Oregon's heading to the Big Ten, it certainly really helps their chances of trying to flip a guy like Justin Williams. He was already down to Oregon and Georgia, so I think he is somebody that they're going to continue to recruit. Maybe try to get him back on campus this upcoming season. They did get an official visit out of him. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the Texas schools continue to recruit him, seeing that he is the number one player in the state of Texas. But I don't necessarily think that this drastically changes Oregon's chances to flip a guy like Justin Williams or Elijah Rushing. I would fully expect this coaching staff to stay involved with both of those guys, keep the communication going, try to get them back out for a visit. So maybe things aren't over for either of those recruits in their respective recruitments, with Elijah Rushing heading to Arizona with a verbal and Justin Williams heading to Georgia with a verbal as well. Keep in mind, too, that Georgia has Justin Williams' teammate Joseph Jonah Ajonye, defensive lineman in the 24 class, committed as well. So that might make it a little bit harder to break those guys up. All right, we have another question from the Stez88. Stez says, late kick Josh, Josh Pate of the Late Kick podcast. Late Kick Josh does a segment called What Ifs. So I ask you, what if Oregon has the same to slightly better offense, but has a top 30 defense? I'm assuming we're talking about the 2023 season and kind of what's in store for the Ducks in this upcoming year. Oregon's offense was crazy last year. I don't want to say unstoppable, but it really felt like the first time since maybe the 2014 season with Marcus Mariota, when they went to the national title game and he won a Heisman. It felt like the confidence was kind of back to that level. You knew Oregon was going to be able to score a lot, and there really weren't that many defenses that were capable of slowing down Bo Nix and the Ducks. That said, Georgia clearly did that, but that was the start of the season. First game for Bo Nix on the road in Atlanta. That was a home game for Georgia. There's not a lot you can say there, but now you enter this year when Kenny Dillingham is no longer the offensive coordinator. He kind of looked like the Bo Nix whisperer in 2022, seeing that Bo Nix was incredibly up and down like this every other week when he was an Auburn Tiger. But now Will Stein comes in to lead the offense for Oregon, and I think that we're still going to see a really good version of Bo Nix, and there's reason to think I'm confident that he's going to be able to get the job done even with a new coach leading the show on offense. But I say all that to say, we all know that the defense was what really held Oregon back a year ago. So if Oregon can have a top 30 defense, I think it really makes you confident that they're going to be able to kind of reach those goals in 2023. Because I don't really think you can hang a particular loss last year on the defense. You can talk about Oregon State for sure. If you're going to hang a loss on the defense in any game, it's going to be that Oregon State game. But the defense also didn't do that great of a job against Washington when they were just airing it out. Michael Penix could seemingly do whatever he wanted operating in the pocket for the Huskies. But if they have a top 30 defense, I think you're able to close the door on a lot more of your opponents, and you don't find yourself in as many close games. I'm thinking back to the Cal game last year where I think Oregon fans were holding their breath a little bit as the Golden Bears kind of tried to mount a late comeback. And then I'm also thinking about that Oregon State game. If you have a top 30 defense, I think you're looking at a more complete group from top to bottom, not a group that you're only confident in just stopping the run, but also confident in getting after the quarterback. I think if you have a top 30 defense, that kind of spells out Oregon kind of figuring things out for the most part. And with their pass rush, it's been a group that they obviously have left a lot to be desired. Now you bring in Jordan Birch and Mateo Uiagalelei, who are going to be instrumental in Oregon's defense, it looks like, in 2023. Certainly Birch coming from the portal, right? I think Mateo is maybe a little bit more of an unknown as far as what his role is going to be like as a true freshman in Oregon's defense. But if Oregon has a top 30 defense, I think that also means that they have figured out their third down woes. How many times did we watch this team last year just get absolutely shredded on third down? You do your job on first and second down, and then they kind of just feel like they checked out on third down. Well, you're not going to win a whole lot of games like that. Certainly not going to win a national championship if you can't figure out the third down woes, which is something that absolutely plagued this team a year ago. So if Oregon has the same to slightly better offense, but has a top 30 defense, I think that Oregon is probably back in the Pac-12 championship game. They should have been in the Pac-12 championship game last year, but we all know they didn't take care of business against Washington and Oregon State. So they have nobody to blame but themselves. If Oregon can get a top 30 defense, I think that puts them in a great spot to really win some games handedly. It gives them a good shot to, the best of their ability, kind of shut down some of these big-time quarterbacks that they're going to be facing. I'm looking at Caleb Williams at USC, Cam Rising at Utah, and Michael Penix at Washington. So I think that if they have a top 30 defense, they're obviously looking like a much more complete team. And I think that you're a lot more confident in Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoi with that defense as kind of the orchestrators and really getting things figured out. So if they have that top 30 defense, I think that is an awesome step in the right direction as far as being more confident in Dan Lanning and really seeing that side of the ball kind of live up to the potential, live up to the hype, and really do what they're supposed to do. You have all the talent in the world to be a top 30 defense on that side of the ball. You have a stellar coaching staff on that side of the ball. You have Dan Lanning leading the defense. You have Tosh Lupoi being one of the best developers of talent. And then you also have Demetrius Martin, who has been nothing but an absolute home run hire for the Ducks, developing and recruiting. So the cornerback spot and the safety spot are a little bit questionable for me heading into this year, just because you have some guys who have played some good football, but not really anybody that's played great football for you. That's why I think you're going to see these transfers and maybe even some of these young guys, these true freshmen from the 23 class, compete for snaps and ultimately play big roles in 23. So love the question. Appreciate it. Keep them coming. All right. Let's see what our next question is, and maybe I'll get a little bit of a sip of water here. All right. This question comes from Jay Allen. Does Justin Herbert ever come around the program anymore? Yeah, I mean, as a lot of you guys know, I'm not in Eugene anymore, so I can't completely vouch for that. But I would say he does still come around the program. Maybe when he has a bye week and he's able to fly back home to Eugene. Obviously, being a Eugene local, I think he has a little bit more of an incentive to be around the program. But I can't remember the last time he was in Eugene, but I would definitely think that he still comes around the program. I bet Oregon would certainly want to line that up with a big recruiting weekend to just, be able to show him off and, be like, hey, that's a Duck right there. He's the highest paid quarterback in the NFL right now, I think. And he's an absolute stud. So I don't remember when he was last around the program, but I'm pretty confident that he does come back around the program for sure. Okay, let's see what we got here. Let's talk about another huge target in Oregon's 24 class. This next question comes from Aaron Martinez. Aaron asks, will Oregon get an OV for Brandon Baker? So Brandon Baker, if you don't know, you probably don't know who Brandon Baker is if you're sleeping under a rock, because this is the number one offensive tackle in the nation for 2024 out of Santa Ana Mater Dei, and he has definitely emerged as Oregon's top priority target along the offensive line. And Brandon Baker is a guy that has been very closely linked with Oregon for his entire recruitment. His older brother played at Oregon, played some defensive line. He's been around the program a million times, and he was a guy that I think was in a great spot to ultimately commit to Oregon back in the fall under Adrian Clem, but that departure kind of created some uncertainty, a little bit of a reset, if you will, for him with his relationships with the Oregon staff. But fortunately for the Ducks, one thing that they did a great job in this spring was getting Baker back on campus and ultimately alleviating any concerns he had of being too comfortable. And I know that one of the reasons they're selling, one of the things they're selling him on is being the next number one offensive tackle from his class to come to Eugene. Josh Connerly was the number one offensive tackle in 2022, and he has absolutely hit the ground running and looks like the next great offensive lineman that's going to come out of Oregon. But it seems like some people might look on the surface and think, well, have things kind of cooled off with Brandon Baker in Oregon? Where are things at? He always seemed like a guy that was long playing his recruitment, playing the long game rather than slow playing. But he seemed like he was not in a hurry to make a commitment. Told me when I first kind of got out to Southern California and, this spring when I talked to him, he's looking kind of at a December time frame for his decision in that early signing period, probably wants to get to his school of choice early. I still think that Oregon's in a great spot here with Brandon Baker, but you do have schools like Texas, Ohio State, and Nebraska that are all staying involved in this recruitment. I know Texas is obviously a big threat because of the Steve Sarkisian factor. You're always going to have a good offense to play in with Steve Sarkisian at the helm. But you also have Ohio State, who got a visit from him. I think he took an OV out there, and Nebraska as well. We have to talk about Nebraska. They seem like they have new life as a recruiting power under Matt Rule. He's made some big moves as a recruiter, and he's definitely prioritized Brandon Baker. He visited, I think, along with his teammate, Nate Frazier, who's a running back in the 24 class. He's committed to Georgia. Oregon fans, I'm sure, are well aware of him. But to answer your question, Aaron, I fully expect that Oregon will get an official visit from Brandon Baker. Maybe it just looks like they've lost a little bit of steam in his recruitment because he hasn't popped up on campus recently. But fortunately for Oregon, I think that even though he's going to visit Nebraska, I believe it is this month for an official visit, I don't think that you really need to worry about getting Brandon Baker back on campus a bunch of times because he already knows what the campus looks like, what Oregon's vision is for him, what the community is like. He has a unique situation where he's probably more familiar with Oregon than just about any recruit in this class. Kind of a similar deal with Achilles Smith Jr., right? He's been to Eugene so many times. I don't think that it's a huge concern for him to get him back on campus. That said, I think that you definitely want to get an official visit from him during the season, just so you can really kind of market the Autzen atmosphere, say that it's only going to be getting bigger. You can look at the progress that Alik Terry has made with the offensive line, see how Josh Connerly is shaping up to be an all-time great when we're looking at Oregon offensive linemen. So I think they're definitely going to get an official visit from Brandon Baker. I'm going to try to get out to Mater Dei again, probably next week, now that they're practicing, to get an interview with him, get an interview with Aiden Breland, 5-star defensive lineman that Oregon is recruiting out of Mater Dei as well. All right, let's see what other questions we got here. We got a question from One Old Duck, frequent question asker, so greatly appreciate that. One Old Duck asks, now that Oregon is going to the Big Ten, how many 5-stars will Oregon pick up before the season starts? Well, if we're just looking at before the season starts, I think that's a little bit tough to say, seeing that a lot of these guys don't seem like they're announcing their college commitments before the season starts. If you're looking at the 5-stars that Oregon has the best chance to land right now, I think you don't have to leave the West Coast. I think you're looking at Brandon Baker. It sounds like his decision timeline could be moving up a little bit based on the recent reporting, but I got to do a little bit of digging there. And you also have Aiden Breland. I already talked about the teams that Oregon's battling for Brandon Baker, but for Aiden Breland, it looks like it's Georgia, looks like it's maybe Texas A&M, Miami. So Oregon's going to have to, show that they're capable of winning some of these big recruiting battles with guys like Aiden Breland. I think that Breland is a guy that you might want more than Elijah Rushing just because he's a guy that can generate a lot of havoc and chaos from the interior. And I think that's kind of one of the positions that Oregon has lacked a little bit. You've had guys like Kayvon Thibodeau in recent years make some noise on the edge. And then you also have Brendan Dorless. He's looking like he's a guy that's going to really make a name for himself and solidify himself as one of the top defensive linemen in the country this year. So if we're talking about before the season starts, I don't really know if I can even project any, but maybe we can revisit this when we have some more commitment dates to work with. Williams Nwaneri out of Lee Summit in Missouri, he's going to be announcing his college commitment before too long. Let me actually double check and see when he's announcing his college commitment, because that's someone that we absolutely have to track. All right. Williams Nwaneri is going to be announcing his college commitment on August 14th. That is a Monday at 3 p.m. at his school. He's working from a top 5 of Oklahoma, Missouri, Oregon, Georgia, and Tennessee. This one's a little bit hard to get a read on. I think that with Nwaneri, he popped up in Eugene for Saturday Night Live, so Oregon might have gotten the last visit before he makes his college commitment. But this is a guy that I think was kind of a long shot for Oregon in the 2024 recruiting class for a while now. He did take 2 visits to Oregon, but he was scheduled to take his official visit in the fall. Now that he's taking his, now that he's making his commitment on August 14th, obviously he's not going to be able to take that official visit to Oregon before his decision. That doesn't mean necessarily that it's off the table, but I think that Nwaneri, you can make the case for Oregon because they're starting to produce some more defensive linemen. Dan Lanning has been an absolute, beast when it comes to developing top recruits into NFL draft picks from his time at Georgia. And Lanning is also a Missouri native. So I think you hear some of those things, and there's reasons that maybe Oregon can shake things up with Nwaneri. I feel like the buzz has probably been towards Georgia and Mizzou. With Mizzou really making it a priority to keep some of those top guys home. And Nwaneri is the top player in the state of Missouri, number 1 defensive lineman in the 2024 class. Hard to bet against Georgia, like we talked about, so I wouldn't be surprised if Georgia or Mizzou is the call for Nwaneri on Monday, but maybe I'll find out something over the weekend and share some buzz or intel with you guys about Oregon's chances. So I think that Williams Nwaneri is another guy, if we're just looking at 5 stars that Oregon's involved with. Jordan Ross out of Alabama, I think that Oregon was in a good spot, but now Florida and Tennessee are 2 of the teams that are trending for the Vestavia Hills edge rusher out in Birmingham. So 5-star guys, it's not looking crazy promising right now, but things can change, and we'll have to make sure that we continue to look at that. I think one thing that I can talk about is there is a 5-star committed to another school that Oregon has stayed involved with, and it's not Elijah Rushing in the 2024 class. So I don't want to give too much away there. I'm not sure how much I'm actually allowed to say on that one. So I'm just going to tease you guys with that one. There's a 2024 5-star that I haven't really ever talked about that I just found out Oregon is staying involved with. So we'll have to stay tuned in for that one. Keep you guys on your toes a little bit. All right, we're almost done with the Twitter questions, I believe. So let me go ahead and make sure that I can check all of these ones off. Okay, let's see. Okay, we kind of already talked about this a little bit, but we'll go ahead and revisit it. This question is from Jessica Lee. Max, who are some players you think are on the radar of the Oregon staff to flip? So one guy I talked about in a recent episode was James Madison. He's a 2024 wide receiver that's currently committed to Missouri. He plays his high school ball at St. Thomas Aquinas, a storied program out in the state of Florida, out in Fort Lauderdale. He's a Kansas City native, even though he plays his ball in Florida. But I think if we're just looking at the big picture for Oregon, especially with Jeremiah McClellan announcing his college commitment on Sunday, if in the event that the Ducks aren't able to get McClellan, I'm told that they have stayed involved with James Madison. Obviously, he's playing big-time football out there in the state of Florida, so he is definitely an elite guy that is certainly worth keeping an eye on. And then we also talked about Elijah Rushing. Not really any reason to think that he is going to be flipping anytime soon, but that's certainly a guy that you need to keep an eye on just because we'll see what happens. It ain't over until it's over in that recruitment. So looking at some other flip targets, I'm scrolling through their offers right now just to see guys that I think they could have a chance with here in the 24 class. So might be stalling just a little bit, but you'll have to bear with me. Oh, another guy that I think Oregon could potentially flip down the road. I don't think the situation is there right now, but Isaiah Garcia is another guy that I think you definitely have to keep an eye on. He's a 2024 offensive tackle out of Draper, Utah, Corner Canyon High School. He committed to Kyle Whittingham and the Utes either earlier this month or late last month. So even though Oregon didn't win out there, you're going against Utah, you're going against USC, you're going against Stanford. I think that Oregon has the ability to maybe shake that one up, seeing that they have a strong pipeline to the state of Utah, and Alik Terry did a really good job in that recruitment, as did Cutter Leftwich. And you got to keep in mind that Isaiah Garcia goes to Corner Canyon, where the Ducks found Jackson Powers Johnson. So I'm not saying that that's a prediction I'm making, but I think he could be a guy that you got to keep on your radar as far as potential flip candidates, right, in this 2024 class. So we'll see who else is there. Even though Nate Frazier's committed to Georgia, I think that Oregon is definitely going to stay involved in that one, stay swinging away. There's a long time between now and signing day. We're about 4 months out. So definitely have to keep an eye on what's going on with some of these guys, even if they're committed to other programs. I think that those are some of the guys that I kind of have in mind right now. As far as people that Oregon is maybe going to keep on their radar and go after here in the 24 class. All right, who else can I think of? Anybody else? Can I think of anybody else? I mean, maybe Joseph Jonah Ajonye, but probably not. Who else? Yeah, that's going to be where I'm at right now as far as guys that I think Oregon could have a chance at possibly flipping, and guys that you need to keep on your radar. All right, maybe there's one more. No, I think that's pretty much the last one. There's a question from Unique Syntax. Is Oregon going to see any other recruits commit soon now that they've announced their move to the Big Ten? I don't think that I think we already kind of touched on that one, so I don't want to get too repetitive. So with that, let's go ahead and hop into the comments and check out some of your guys' questions. For those of you that are tuned in live here during the show on YouTube at Oregon Football Max Torres, thank you guys for being here, and thanks so much for your questions. All right, starting to work through these comments and questions. Andrew has a couple that I can probably get to. Christopher, Max, get that pre-show Snapple. I'm currently drinking a delicious Snapple apple, the best flavor. Yeah, if you guys have been watching me for a while, you know my love and adoration for Snapple. It is my dream to get this podcast sponsored by Snapple. I have no idea how to make that happen, but I hope that it happens someday. If I keep working, keep chipping away, and making my presence known here in the podcasting world and the YouTube world, maybe we can shake something up. But I'm glad you're enjoying a Snapple. I need to get some more. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Andrew's talking about, sadly, I don't see any 5 stars this cycle. Seems like Oregon ran into Georgia or Texas at every turn and won't get Kobe Black, Williams Nwaneri, David Stoney, Brandon Baker, Aiden Breland, and they lost out on Rushing, Williams, and Frazier. And he says, but hopefully a couple consolation prizes in Jason Brown Jr. and Braden Platt, maybe 1 or 2 other small ads, and hopefully no decommits. Yeah, so you talked about a lot in your first comment, but just to talk about Jason Brown Jr. and Braden Platt, I think that with Nate Frazier committed to Georgia now, Oregon's going to stay involved in that one, but I really think that Jason Brown Jr. is Oregon's top target at running back. Of course, you already have Dejon Riggs in the fold from Washington, D.C., St. John's, but Jason Brown Jr. has been a guy that Oregon has stayed involved with, getting him on campus for 2 recent visits for Saturday Night Live, then he also visited in the spring, I believe. So that's a top Northwest kid that you're definitely going to have a chance with. I think some of the other schools that are involved there are Louisville and Michigan State, and then, of course, the hometown Washington Huskies. I think those are some of the guys that you have to keep an eye on for. But I think if Nate Frazier is indeed staying with his Georgia commit, I think that Jason Brown Jr. is a phenomenal guy that Oregon could definitely add, that Carlos Loughlin could turn up the heat on and potentially land. I think that he is definitely the kind of back that Carlos Loughlin likes. He's a little bit undersized at about 5'9", But I think he's really twitchy. You add some weight on him, I could kind of see him being similar to Noah Whittington in Oregon's offense. And then as for Braden Platt, his commitment's coming up. He's announcing on September 4th here in the fall. He's down to a final 2 of Oregon and Oklahoma. I think that Oregon is going to be the call there. I made my prediction for him quite a while ago, a little over a month, I want to say. And I think that the track aspect that Oregon can offer Braden Platt is not something that Oklahoma can offer Braden Platt. Oklahoma absolutely has the tradition at the linebacker spot over Oregon, but Oregon has the longevity. They have the loyalty. They've been involved much longer than Oklahoma has, and no one can sell track better than Oregon has. And they have distance on their side for once for the 4-star linebacker out of Yelm, Washington, Braden Platt. All right. What do we have here? We have a question from Bud Everts. Bud's a frequent listener. Thanks for your question, Bud. Glad to have you here. Bud asks, it seems like by being members of the Big Ten now, our chances to nail down top players will increase with regard to when battling schools like Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia. Do you agree? Yeah, I think that's a key word. You have to look at the key word in your question, Bud, right? Increase. Chances to nail down top players will increase, specifically when you're going against schools like Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia. Those are probably the top 3 recruiting powers in the sport right now. I think the 2 schools that you could also mention that are kind of in that company, obviously have Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers, and then you also have Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan Wolverines. I think, yeah, those are some of the schools that are really, really, really recruiting at a top level. So as far as their chances increasing, I think that is something that I do agree with. If you're talking about winning outright recruiting battles over some of these schools, it's tough. It really is. I mean, you did see Oregon recently win a recruiting battle over Ohio State with Mateo Uiagalelei. That was obviously a tremendous recruiting win. I'm trying to think of some other schools some other guys that Oregon's going against going out against Ohio State for. You have Bryce West and Aaron Scott Jr., 2 2024 cornerbacks in this class that both chose the Buckeyes over the Ducks. Not really a huge surprise there, though. Scott did have a final 3 of Oregon, Michigan, and Ohio State. So I think that there's just, in order for Oregon to, increase their chances of winning recruiting battles, nailing down top players, like, against the schools like Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia, the Big Ten move is great. It really is. You can sell more exposure. You can sell more big-time games. You can also sell being closer to home for some of these top guys that they're going after. But at the end of the day, Bud, there's 2 things that moving to the Big Ten doesn't really guarantee Oregon. That's out of their control. That's winning. Number 1, you got to win. Winning is the best recruiting tool. And then number 2, development. I think that Oregon's move to the Big Ten doesn't guarantee that they're going to win more games, and it doesn't guarantee that they're going to be able to develop any better than they already do. So those are 2 things that are completely in their control that they have to take care of business for. I've talked about in previous episodes, this was a long time ago, but after Kayvon Thibodeau got drafted, I said that recruiting and ultimately developing guys is Oregon's best recruiting pitch because they haven't won a national title. But that goes back to my other point. If you win, and you win a lot, specifically a national championship, that's going to be something that I think can push you over the edge against some of these schools like Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia. Because Oregon can sell the facilities, they can sell some development, they can sell playing time, the uniforms. I don't think uniforms is really something they sell, even though their uniforms are really cool. The point I'm making here, nothing sells more than posing with the national championship trophy on your visit. That's what I think about when I think about the big picture with Oregon, and not only with how long I've been covering them and following them, how cool it would be to cover a national championship and see them win it, but there's no better recruiting tool than winning. So these other schools, Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia, when they host recruits, they can all take pictures with that shiny national championship trophy, and that's not something that Oregon can do right now. So I do think that they're move to the Big Ten helps that their chances of getting top recruits against those schools, but it's not as simple as that. There's more that Oregon has to do if they want to continue and maybe even start winning recruiting battles over schools like Bama and Georgia. They've done it over Ohio State, and now maybe that's that next tier, going to Alabama and Georgia. Great question. All right, let's see what else we have here. I have a question from Raymond. Raymond asks, "Hey Max, how do you think the Ducks coaching staff compares to the rest of top-tier football programs?" That's a great question. Yeah, I think that Oregon has, an awesome coaching staff. I especially when you're talking about recruiting, I think they've obviously taken care of a lot of that, and they've checked a lot of boxes when it comes to recruiting. But when you're looking at adjustments and developing, I think that you have maybe a little bit more fog there. Not really sure just yet. I think that Dan Lanning has really assembled an awesome coaching staff that was really solidified and I think evidenced by Kenny Dillingham's success. When Kenny Dillingham got hired away from Florida State, I think a lot of Oregon fans were like, wow, this is a kid that you're bringing in to run the offense. Kenny Dillingham is young. I think he's the youngest head coach in college football now. But Kenny Dillingham came in, was a young guy. There were a lot of question marks as far as just, what was the success that he was going to be able to have at Oregon. I'm not saying people doubted him necessarily, but these were questions. These were talking points that were in the Oregon football community after he got hired. And look what he did. He set the offense on fire. He absolutely lit up the scoreboard, played himself into another job at Arizona State. Then you have Adrian Clem, another guy that Dan Lanning had to hire after he got the job at Oregon. Oregon's offensive line was amazing, and they did so well that he got a job offer from the Patriots and ended up taking it. So I think that Oregon's coaching staff is really not too far off when you're looking at the top tier schools like Alabama, like Georgia, like Ohio State, like Michigan. Because when you're looking at a coaching staff, you want to have guys that can coach and guys that can recruit, or guys that can build relationships. That's what recruiting is, right? So I think that Oregon has largely, almost everybody on Oregon's coaching staff now has proven they can recruit, has proven that they can build those relationships. But when you're looking at that other box, you're looking at coaching, which is teaching the fundamentals sometimes, which is finding those little things to tweak in a guy's game. Hey, don't do it this way. Maybe do it this way. When you see a guy do that, then maybe you need to change and do this. Take a different angle. And also just teaching the playbook, teaching the game. How fast can a guy get up to speed on a playbook with this coach when there's something new that he has to learn? There's a lot of things that go into it. And then ultimately developing guys. And I don't want to just talk about those 5 stars who come in and become draft picks. Like, that's great, but you got to think that the coach is working with a little bit more of a head start when you're looking at those 5-star guys versus those 3-star guys, those guys who come to Oregon and fans are looking at it on signing day saying, oh, that's cool. He's a 3-star, we'll see how he can do. But when you take those guys that are 3 stars and you develop them into NFL draft picks, that's when if I'm a coach, I'm puffing my chest out a little bit. I'm saying, yeah, I saw the potential. Kind of like Marcus Mariota, right? With Chip Kelly. He was a 3-star guy that Chip Kelly was able to find, gave him that chance, and turned him into a Heisman Trophy winner. Hasn't been super successful in the NFL, obviously, but that's kind of an example. Justin Herbert, local kid in Eugene. He was maybe going to go to Montana State or Portland State. There were hardly any other offers on the table, and then Oregon comes in with an offer, develops him. I don't know if I want to say develop, because he could have done so much more with Mario Cristobal when he was at Oregon. He really could have done so much more, but he is killing it in the NFL. That's a guy you can still say he came to Oregon and got developed by the Ducks. So I think that there's plenty of optimism there, and there's some proven results so far, but we got to see what guys like Brandon Dorless, guys like Jordan Birch, guys like Evan Williams and Tysheem Johnson, how do they take their games to the next level with this Oregon coaching staff, because it can be a little bit hard to judge on just 1 year. But like if you're looking at Demetrius Martin with Christian Gonzalez, that's taken care of. You know that he can develop. But I think when you're looking at the defensive line, you have some guys that are going to the league. Obviously, Jordan Riley was developed by Tony Tuioti at Nebraska and at Oregon. He looks like he's making some plays for the Giants in the preseason right now. But the linebacker room in Oregon is a major question mark right now. So seeing what Dan Lanning can do with guys like Jeffrey Bassa, Justin Jacobs, I think that's going to go a long way in kind of really helping figure out how this coaching staff compares to other schools. But really, it's recruiting and it's developing. And it's those in-game adjustments. When it's coming down to the wire, you're in a close game, what's that coach saying that says, hey, maybe we need to tweak this a little bit, do this instead of that? I think that's part of what you have to look at. Zaheem says, yeah, back like we never left. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thanks for being here. Dennis Mackey, Max, thank you for this. I needed the diversion. I live on Maui, and it's been rough. Oh, man, I am super sorry to hear that, Dennis, as far as, everything that's going on with the fires out in Hawaii, in Lahaina. Definitely sending my thoughts and prayers out to you, your family, your community. I hope you're doing all right. And if this show can distract you just a little bit, then I'm super glad to hear that. When the Ducks and their Rainbow Warriors meet this year, I hope they do something special to honor the fallen on Maui. Yeah, that's going to be a fun non-conference game, and I'm right there with you. I hope they do something to honor the people in Maui. So, just want to respectfully say I hope everything's you're keeping your head up the best that you can. I can't relate to that at all. I've never been in that situation, but just want you to know that I'm thinking about you and your family. And I know you tune into a lot of these shows, so just sending you my best out there in Hawaii. Stay safe and hope things get better before too long. Wink with the question, hey Max, any news on the new development of Jordan Seaton visiting during the USC game? Well, I had not heard that, but I know that Jordan Seaton is a huge recruit. You're looking at an IMG Academy offensive lineman. He's a high 4-star guy, was previously, I think he was previously at St. John's in Washington, D.C., so he is uncommitted, and he's one of the best linemen in the country, interior offensive lineman, according to 247 Sports, 6'5", 287 pounds. It's just interesting to me as Oregon's looking for their interior offensive lineman in this class. You already have Devin Brooks out of Clackamas. You had Preston Taumua, who looked like he was going to be heading to Oregon, but the Ducks ended up passing on that one, is kind of what I reported. He's going to be going to Nebraska. But now you're looking at, looks like Jordan Seaton. If he is, in fact, visiting for the USC game, that's something I have to follow up with on my end. But you're looking at Jordan Seaton, and you're also looking at Eddie Pierre-Louis out of the Tampa, Florida area. So it's interesting, and maybe isn't so coincidental that Alik Terry is prioritizing two of the top players in the state of Florida in his search. He's only looking for the best at Oregon, and those guys certainly check the box. So now that Jordan Seaton's at IMG, that gives Oregon another Florida connection with Alik Terry. So those are two high-profile guys. I think Eddie Pierre-Louis, you're looking at Oklahoma as a team that is in a great spot for him, and then Oregon has stayed involved as well. I think he's expected to take an official visit to Oregon in the fall. So I personally, Wink, have not heard anything about Jordan Seaton visiting during the USC game. I got to do some more homework on that one. All right, Zaheem has a comment. Nwaneri is, in my opinion, more of a priority need than Aiden Breland, though I'm not sure if we have as good of a chance to land Nwaneri. Yeah, I think that Aiden Breland is really, like I said, that priority guy, the most realistic 5-star as far as your defensive targets. You have Nwaneri, and you also have Kobe Black, who is out of the Waco, Texas area. He's a 5-star corner that put Oregon in his final 5, along with Texas, Texas A&M, LSU, and it's Ohio State. Having a little bit of a brain fart, but bear with me here. Kobe Black is absolutely an elite player and a top corner that visited Oregon in June. but his top 5 to confirm, you have LSU, Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, and Texas A&M. He looks like he's trending towards Texas, but you never know. It's not over until it's over. But yeah, we're talking about Nwaneri and Aiden Breland. I think that Aiden Breland is probably the bigger priority just because he's more realistic. But I'm really curious to see what kind of weight that Dan Lanning connection carries for Williams Nwaneri. Oregon has been kind of striking out on some of these top guys, but it's not going to go like that forever. They're gonna hit it. They're gonna land some of these top guys, and I think they're gonna make some. They're gonna surprise some people with some of their additions in this 24 class because it's already pretty full. This is exactly where you want to be if you're Dan Lanning and the Ducks heading into this 23 season. You have 22 guys already committed, and now these guys that you're still recruiting are still some of those top priority guys, and just tremendous work done already in this 24 class. All right, let's see here. Obi-Wan, there has been more change and more improvement for the U of O in the last 2 years than I have seen in the last 54 years of being a Quacker backer. We get an SEC coach and move to the Big Ten. Yeah, this is why it's so fun to talk to the Duck fans that have been fans for a long time and have followed the team longer than I have. I mean, it's obviously pretty sad that the Pac-12 is and by all indications on its way out, but this is the spot you want to be in. I think you get a coach in Dan Lanning who's incredibly promising, very, very talented. He's shown that he can recruit, and he's shown that he can coach. A 10-win season in your debut season as a head coach in an area that you're not really connected to at all, you can't really ask for more than that. So I think that Dan Lanning is obviously their guy. Contract extension through the 2028 season, and you find yourself moving to the Big Ten, which ensures that you're going to be in the forefront of the conversation, and you're going to be with the haves and not the have-nots in college football. Let's see what else we have here. Okay. Another question from Raymond. We hear so much about the prowess of Ohio State for placing wide receivers up to the next level. Isn't Junior Adams a phenomenal coach as far as bringing the best of the young men he coaches? Yeah, I think that Junior Adams is definitely a really strong coach. Obviously, he coached Cooper Kupp during his time at Eastern Washington, and he's kind of the crown jewel of Junior Adams as a recruiter. But he also worked with some good receivers at Washington, and I think he's definitely a coach, that kind of doesn't get the recognition that he deserves. But wait until Troy Franklin goes to the league. I think that he could be the next feather in Junior Adams' cap as a developer. He's been kind of all over the place as far as where he's trying to target guys in this 24 class. If you're looking at who they signed in 23, you have California with Jurion Dickey. He's a Bay Area guy. Junior Adams is a Bay Area guy. That one just makes sense. You have Ashton Kozart from the state of Texas. He's originally a Pacific Northwest guy, so you can see some of the connections kind of working out there. But Junior Adams is trying to push into Texas some more and into Missouri some more. I think you're really just going to see him continue to grow as a coach. He's certainly one of the best recruiters, and I think one of the better developers on this staff. I think that Brian McClellan, if you want to compare the two, it's a little bit tricky because the Ducks didn't pass the ball very much. But I think that maybe some fans were a little bit worried about the future of the wide receiver spot when Junior Adams comes over from Washington, of all places. You're hiring a rival coach, right? But I think he's been an absolute stud on this coaching staff, and he's only going to continue to get better for the Ducks. So super, super happy with the way that Junior Adams has done a great job at Oregon. Chris has a question. Texas is killing it in recruiting like they usually do, but will it equate to wins on the field, or will the Longhorns do the usual and fall into mediocrity? Yeah, this is kind of cool. I mean, getting a question that's not even related to Oregon. This is always fun. I think that obviously Texas has quite a bit of work to do when it comes to the on the field product after going 6-3 in Big 12 play last year, 8-5 overall. I think that fell well short of the mark that Steve Sarkisian set for this team. But I think that 2023 will really go a long way in telling us if the Longhorns are for real, because Texas and Texas A&M kind of have, similar deals here. They're both recruiting powers, but Texas A&M went 5-7 last year after signing the best recruiting class in the program's history. So I think that Texas, I'm more confident right now that Texas is going to be able to pan out and get some wins on the field versus Texas A&M. But Jimbo Fisher and Steve Sarkisian are two of the strongest offensive coaches in college football. So we'll have to see. We will absolutely have to see. See me on the big screen is here, giving a go Ducks. What's going on? Thanks for being here. Another question. Let's see what else we have. We're getting some more. Wow, we're seeing a lot of comments here in the chat, so I'm doing my best to keep up with all of them. Obi-Wan with another question. I'm totally new to recruiting, but what dictates what teams/players to watch from a coach's standpoint? I think when you're looking at what coaches are looking for, I think they obviously have their position that they're focused on, but they also kind of have little recruiting hotbeds that they're focused on. Just to kind of give you some insight into this current Oregon coaching staff, Tosh Lepoy, the defensive coordinator, one of the biggest recruiters on Oregon staff. He's from California, from the Bay Area, so he really has California locked down. Demetrius Martin, Oregon's cornerbacks coach, he's from Southern California, so he's really focused on that area and that state. But you're also going to see them try to expand their reach with top targets coming from outside of their recruiting zones. Will Stein is from the state of Texas, so he's instrumental in Oregon's work in the Lone Star State. Alik Terry is from Miami, so he's a big part of Oregon's recruiting efforts in the Sunshine State. And the list kind of goes on. But as far as what players to watch, I think part of it starts with looking at some of the best schools in the country, because that's ultimately where you want to find your guys at, which is why Oregon has looked to schools like St. John Bosco, like Mater Dei. In this cycle, you have St. Francis Academy, home to Michael Van Buren, 2024 quarterback commit, and then Ife Obadegwu, 2024 cornerback commit. So I think you definitely start at some of those national powerhouse schools, but you also have to look at where you have connections geographically, where guys are from. And then you have to also look at the camp circuit. A lot of the coaches aren't always at these camps, and they're also looking at the 7-on-7 circuit, which I think is a little bit harder to evaluate, and you can't put too much weight into that. But I think that's a big part in where they find their players as well. So I think that's a loaded question, but try to do my best to answer that one, and then also see what kind of guys, players on the roster have connections to some of these top recruits as well. Okay, what do we have here? All right. Basically. All right. Question from Travis. What other recruits that committed to other schools within stable conferences do you think might now be interested in flipping back to Oregon? Yeah, this is a tough one. Wow. a lot of questions on flipping. I mean, we talked about Georgia. I think that Nate Frazier is someone that Oregon's going to stay in the mix for. I thought that Oregon had a great chance with him leading up to his recruitment. I think Justin Williams is someone you continue to look at. But as far as, guys that are committed to other schools, I don't have too many other ones to talk about, at least right now. So maybe I already talked about some of them, then you can listen back on this, the earlier part of the episode. I just don't want to be too repetitive. Zahim with a question. Do you think Mateo will have 10 plus combined tackles for losses and sacks in his freshman season? I say yes. Ooh, those are some big numbers to look for, to strive for sure. Not going to be easy for him to get there, but I don't know, because I think right now when I'm just looking at Mateo's potential role in this defense, the only one that I can really compare it back to is Kayvon Thibodeau, who took some time, and he was the number one player in the country, and he still took some time to get out to get up to that level. But I let's make the case for why Mateo could do it. I think he had phenomenal coaching at St. John Bosco and in the Southern California area. He's physically ready to go, 6'5", 260, whatever it is. We still don't have updated roster heights and weights right now as we enter the second week of fall camp for Oregon. But I think he's there from a physical standpoint. He's probably there from a technical standpoint. I think that Jordan Birch talking about him doing things that other guys just can't do certainly bodes really well for him. But I think that if you're looking at combined tackles for losses and sacks being around 10, I think he can do it, especially when you look at the depth that they have on the interior and the fact that teams are going to be focusing on Jordan Birch a lot. Maybe that frees Mateo up. But I don't know. I mean, I'm not even so quick to slot him into that starting job, seeing that the Ducks have Mace Funa also at the edge. And then maybe we'll see Brandon Dorless working on the edge a little bit as well. I think he can do it, but it's not going to be easy, and he's definitely going to have to carve out a pretty significant role. So yeah, I think that would be great. Dennis with another question, future episode idea. Would love to see a video for us dunces that breaks down exactly what the differences are between official and unofficial visits for prospective recruits. Yeah, no, this is a great question that I've been asked before. I actually don't think we need a whole episode for it, but I'm always down. I think really when you're looking at official and unofficial, a lot of it is tied into finances. Unofficial visit means that the family pays for the visit, pays for the travel, pays for the hotel, whatever it is. It's on their dime to come out and see the school. But official visits are trips that are more or less entirely covered by the school. And that's why schools only get a limited number of officials to give to recruits. You know, they're paying to fly the family out. They're paying for other parts of the visit versus a different case when it comes to unofficial visits. Interesting development as far as recruits having an unlimited amount of official visits now. That's great and all, but it doesn't change things in the eyes of schools. They still only have so many official visits that they can give out. So that's why you have to keep an eye on a guy like potentially IMG Academy offensive lineman Jordan Seaton coming out for an official visit. It's not easy to get guys out from Florida. That is a expensive, long trip. But if you can get him out for an official visit, then that's going to make it easier, I think, to get him on campus. Hung Nguyen with a comment. Max, thank you for everything that you do. I listen to you all the time. Thank you so much for the kind words. Appreciate your continued support. I love doing this. I love hitting the recruiting trail. I love talking and being an insider and getting a good feel for things around that recruiting vision and, you know, Oregon's push for the best players in the country. Playboy 1625 asks, you think we got a chance at Kobe Black? Yeah, this is a tough one for sure. I think that Kobe Black looks like he's trending towards Texas. I don't know when he's announcing his commitment, but he's a Texas guy. Steve Sarkisian really sent a statement when he landed Colin Simmons, one of the top edge rushers. I think 247 has him as their number one edge rusher out of Duncanville. I think that it's definitely a long shot for Oregon to get Kobe Black, but fortunately for them, they did get him on campus in June. So maybe you got a little bit of a chance there. Zahim asks, what's Oregon's chances at Eddie Pierre-Louis? I think this is an interesting one. It sounds like Oregon is kind of near the top of his list right now. I'm trying to get him on the phone for an interview, but obviously Alik Terry being a Florida native really helps. He's a young guy that's been a huge hit on the recruiting trail with guys. I think getting Eddie Pierre-Louis out for another visit for an official is big. He has visited on campus since Terry was hired and under Dan Lanning. So I think that you have a realistic chance at getting Eddie Pierre-Louis, but we have to see what his future trip itinerary looks like and when he's going to be making that decision, because Oregon's biggest remaining need right now on the offensive line, I think, is at the interior spot, but you still have them going after Brandon Baker as well, and maybe even staying involved with Isaiah Garcia. And then now it looks like Jordan Seaton is someone that Oregon is certainly staying involved with. Let's see what else that we got here. We got Ruben in the chat. What's up, Ruben? Great job, Max. Appreciate you. What else we got here? We have some conversation in the chat. Question from Marty Marr. How much playing time do you think Jurion will get? I am hearing great things from training camp, and his high school highlights look bananas. Yeah, Jurion Dickey, man, I don't even know if wild card is the right word, but he might be a wild card in this wide receiver room. I talked about this on yesterday's episodes, looking at Oregon's fall camp checklist. I have an episode for offense and an episode for defense. Had a lot of fun there. Go give those a listen if you haven't already. They're also here on my YouTube channel. But I say that Jurion Dickey might be a wild card because Oregon has a lot of mouths to feed at that wide receiver spot. Troy Franklin is the talk of the town, but you also have a bunch of transfers in, and Trayshawn Holden, Tez Johnson, Gary Bryant Jr. It looks like Tez and Trayshawn are going to have a decent role, be a significant part of this Will Stein offense in 23. But you also have Kyler Casper, who I call the sleeping giant in Oregon's wide receiver room. 6'6", 207 pounds, athletic as hell, and a guy that just can move. He shouldn't be able to move the way he does at his size. He's going to be looking to bite at the heels of some of those veterans. You also have Chris Hudson, but when you're looking at Jurion, I think he's going to be going against guys like Kyler Casper, guys like Trayshawn Holden for that bigger wide receiver spot. I think it's the Z spot. I could be wrong, but I'm working on getting that figured out. So I think that Jurion should get a decent amount of playing time. I think that the way that I would look at it is I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up burning his red shirt. I think I find it hard to think that he's going to be starting at some time this year, but I think he is absolutely going to be involved and be a regular in that two deep. Okay, what else do we have here? Any other questions in the chat? Let's see what we got here. All right, question from Unbearable Media. Do you think Nike will continue its commitment if Phil Knight passes? This is a heavy heart question, but yeah, I think so. I think Oregon, more than any other school, is Nike University. Obviously, Phil Knight is an alum, and then you have his wife, Penny Knight. Both of them have been incredibly generous in their philanthropy and gifts to the program. But I know that Phil Knight is getting up there in age, so that's something to think about. But I don't want to spend too much time on this. I would definitely think that that Oregon is going to continue to get a commitment from Nike in that situation. Let's see what we have here. Oh, Anton Z with a great question. Which freshman may start? Well, let's just look at this question exclusively through the lens of the 2023 recruiting class. So true freshmen, they've never played in college. Man, this is an interesting one. I think one guy that probably doesn't get enough talk from this freshman class is Tatum Tuioti. And I'm going to tell you why. Well, not only is he a coach's son, I don't think that plays into it necessarily, but it does in the fact that he is super advanced from a technical standpoint. I think we kind of talked about this a little bit in the past with Brandon Buckner, who is dad coach for the Arizona Cardinals. He's now at Middle Tennessee State, I want to say. But Tatum Tuioti, I think he's going to have a pretty good role in this Oregon defense, even as a true freshman. So I think Tatum Tuioti is someone that you have to look at that may start. Mateo Uyunglele certainly has to be in that discussion as well. Jurion Dickey could end up being a starter, but he's going to have to really, really show out. I think he has all the potential in the world, too. He's incredibly athletic, incredibly physical, good route runner. Let's see who else. I think that Dalen Austin may be somebody that deserves a little bit of discussion. Maybe not starting right away, but I could see him potentially becoming a starter at some point. And the only reason I say that is because Oregon's cornerback room, if you're looking at the returners, Triquez Bridges, Dante Manning, they've been good, not great. And at times, maybe not even good. But the reason I say that is I feel like nobody has a safe job in that cornerback room because they brought in 5 corners from the high school ranks. They brought in 2 corners from the transfer ranks. So if we're just looking at freshmen, I think Dalen Austin is a guy who fits the mold of this Dan Lanning defense perfectly. 6'1", 180 pounds. He can run. has some experience in track. He was an All-American. And then Cole Martin, I think, could end up finding himself on the field more so as a returner, but I really like the nastiness that he plays with at the cornerback spot. We just hit an hour and a half. This has to be the longest live stream that I have ever had, but I'm having a really good time. I'm getting a little bit hungry, so I might have to wind it down a little bit and get some lunch here soon. All right, what else do we have here? The Truth with a question. Hello, Max. What do you think are the most important things to tell recruits to get them to commit to Oregon? So maybe we're looking at Oregon's pitch for recruits. I think you're looking at the development. I think that's kind of where you have to start this conversation. I think that you have to maybe sell guys that have come through Oregon at a particular position. You also have to look at the overall class and the fit within the scheme, whether that's offense or defense. I think that you try to sell momentum on the recruiting trail. Look at all these guys that are hopping in and committing to us. Obviously, that's a tremendous vote of faith in the vision that Dan Lanning and the coaches have for this program. And you also have to look at those guys being potential faces of the Oregon recruiting class. I think you have to try to sell yourself as better developers than other schools. I think you also are hearing a lot of guys being sold on being part of that first class that brings a national championship to Eugene. It's an interesting point to look at because I talked about the value of being able to sell a national championship to recruits, but I also think there's some value in being the first. I think that's part of what makes Oregon unique, even though it's not ideal that they haven't won a national championship. I think being able to sell, you guys can be the first and make some history here. I think that also factors into kind of what you want to tell a recruit to try to get them to come to Oregon. And then being able to come to Oregon to play in a little bit more of a low-key spot. Eugene's not a big city. There's not a lot of distractions, so you can come to Oregon and lock in on football and live in a beautiful place. The Northwest is amazing. I love the Northwest. I lived in Eugene for 2 years, so I know about all the great things that it has to offer. You have some good food as well. Really nice people in the Northwest, and just a community that is all in on Oregon football, which is great, and any recruit is going to want that. Let's see what else we have here. Question from Corey. Maybe we'll make this one of the last ones. Which below the radar dudes stand a chance to make some noise this season? Yeah, I've talked about a lot of the freshmen already at Oregon. I think that under the radar. So what do you classify as under the radar? I feel like Jordan James is somebody that maybe isn't getting talked about enough. Ahead of the 2023 season for Oregon, the running back room, it's easy to just have all that focus and attention on Bucky and Noah. But I think Jordan James played a lot his freshman year, and there's a lot of confidence in Eugene right now that he's going to be able to take that next step in his game. Burned a red shirt last year, but he's got plenty of competition in that room with the two starters, 1A, 1B, Bucky and Noah, and then Dante Dowdell and Jaden Lamar are nipping on his heels as well, trying to see the field as well, even as true freshmen. So I think Jordan James is somebody. I just talked about Tatum Tuioti. I think he's somebody that could definitely make some noise this season. I think that Johnny Bowens is an interesting guy to look at. I think just the speed of the game and learning the scheme is kind of what they're trying to get him ready for. But he's a guy out of the state of Texas, a guy they flipped from Texas A&M in the 23 class that they are very high on for his potential and what he's going to be able to do. And then maybe a little bit of an under the radar guy is Nico Reed. I think he could be a very, very good solution for Oregon at corner this year. Comes over from Colorado, played under Demetrius Martin. That's a guy that Demetrius Martin knows incredibly well. He knows what he brings to the table as a player. And then just flipping it the other way, Reed knows what Martin is like as a coach. So I think that definitely bodes well for him to be successful in Oregon's defense. And the Ducks are looking for a leader at that position. Triquez Bridges and Dante Manning come back, but just because these new guys come in from the portal doesn't mean that they're not going to try to be leaders and make a name for themselves and stake a claim for a piece of that defense. So Kyrie Jackson is another guy that I'm excited about coming over from Alabama. didn't have tremendous success there, but obviously he knows the blueprint. He's a 6'3" DB, and I think he could make some noise as well. So I'm trying to think of other guys that could make some noise. Oh, sorry, I have to keep drinking water. It can be a little hard running these shows solo. Devin Jackson. How about we talk about Devin Jackson, inside linebacker for Oregon, All-American guy out of the state of Nebraska that they signed in 2022, the last class with Mario Cristobal. He came to Oregon, he said, at 207, and now he's at 228 pounds, and he's still trying to stake his claim as the fastest guy on the team. I think Roger Pleasant would probably have something else to say, but that was one of the big things about Devin Jackson coming to Oregon, coming out of high school, was his speed, was his athleticism. Now you face the challenge of bulking up and not losing any of that. But he talked to the media for the first time this week, and he sounds really confident. Other players that we get to hear from talk very highly about Devin Jackson, and we know that the Dan Lanning linebacker ideally can run, can hit, can cover, and I think that he could be kind of when we're talking about Nico Reed being a solution at corner. I think Devin Jackson could end up playing a bigger role on this Oregon defense than some might have expected. Because right now that linebacker spot is kind of being dominated right now by Justin Jacobs, Jeffrey Bassa, Jamal Hill, who moves down from the secondary to be a linebacker. And you also have Connor Sowell, who comes over from Arizona State. So some really interesting pieces at linebacker, but I think Devin Jackson is definitely a guy who qualifies as under the radar that could make some noise this year. All right. I think we're going to go ahead and wind it down there. An hour and 36 minutes, about to hit 37. What an awesome time. Appreciate you guys for stopping by, taking some time out of your day to talk some ball with me, talk some Cruton here on the Oregon Recruiting Hour. If you haven't already, do me a quick favor, hit that like button and subscribe to the YouTube channel. I don't want to ask too many times, but the support has been great. Trying to grow the show and grow the channel, and share the Ducks Dish podcast with your friends, with your family, with other Duck fans. And then make sure to lock in with me on social media at Torres Sports on Twitter and on Instagram. And make sure you stay tuned into DucksDigest.com for the latest in Oregon recruiting and Oregon football. But that'll do it for me on today's episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to the Oregon Rundown, the Ducks Dish podcast, and we will catch you in the next